Okay, we will get started in a moment. I'll just do a quick little bit of housekeeping as we've had a few other people join. So for this next session, if you have any questions, make sure that you post them in the chat. You can also ask questions using the raise hand function, which is at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If we would also really like to make sure that our presenter is heard. So if you do not have your audio muted, please do so. As well as this, we are currently recording this session. So if you are uncomfortable being recorded, you are more than welcome to turn your video off, and you can rename yourself as well. So without any further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass it over to pardon me, just going to add a spotlight for you, Nazli. So we are joined today by the lovely Nazli Ighani, who is going to be going through creating human connections in every classroom. So thank you so much for coming today, Nazli, and sharing with us today. So I'll pass over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to ask the crowd or yourself if you could let me know, do you see the screen?
Yes, fantastic.
Okay, you get the whole screen, is that right?
I can see the URL bar at the top, audience window.
Do you see the presentation?
Yes, it says creating and then audience window.
Okay, perfect. Is it whole screen though? Like you guys have a good view of everything? Okay, perfect.
Yes.
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today, and I hope that you walk away feeling like you have something to work with. One of the things, just a little briefing, I've been teaching for over 17 years, mainly overseas in Asia and the UAE. And one of the things that I've come to learn from the school year of 20 and 21 is that students need more human connections and stronger communities in the classroom. And which means that they need opportunities to engage with each other, their teachers. And one of the biggest barriers that's come to light is in creating these human connections in the classroom is the amount of time that teachers spend in front of the room talking. Oftentimes we're there to transfer information, explain complex concepts, modeling strategies and skills, or orchestrating parts of a whole group teacher-led lesson. And it doesn't leave a lot of time for students to engage in conversations, to practice and apply collaboration, or even engage in creative problem-solving skills. It doesn't give teachers much time to support that individual learner to master certain specific skills. So the one thing that I'd like to invite the teachers to think about is what do you see your role as, in the classroom? Do you see yourself more as an expert, or do you see yourself as a facilitator? So in taking a closer look at the method of our teaching in the classroom, learning environments cannot look and sound the same as though they did when we went to schools, because I don't call that a classroom, I call that a museum. When we live in a time when students have access to an abundant amount of information at the palm of their hands, what we need to do as educators is to provide them with the right strategies, the skill sets, and the tools of how to interpret, to analyze, and to apply some of this information or strategy to a real life situation. How is that even going to be relatable or relevant to them and their life?
Nazli, just really quickly, there is a pop-up window that says audience window that is sort of blocking our view of the slides, and I don't know if that's something that can be removed.
This one?
Yes, perfect. Yeah.
Okay. So you see, okay, do you still see? Okay,
yes.
Perfect. Thank you for telling me that.
No worries.
So one of the things that I came across was this quote, and it said, "A learning environment is a place where oftentimes we can either make or break a child's learning experience." And I came across this quote, which was really an aha moment for me, is when a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment which it grows in and not the actual flower. So as a parent, as an educator, as a caretaker, we're very quick to point fingers or think that the learner is the one that has the problem or the child's needs correcting, when perhaps it's the environment that we really need to readjust and fix. And once students learn a little bit about themselves and what their needs are over the course of the year, they're actually better able to advocate for themselves and learn to communicate what their needs are within that learning community. So when we change the learning environment to accommodate the students rather than expecting the students to change to fit into an environment, we see greater results and actually more motivation. So, like all of us, students are often willing to invest their time and focus when they're interested in a topic. Likewise, when we go through a staff meeting or so forth, we don't like being talked at the entire time, you know. Sitting through a same routine lesson structure day after day can lead to disinterest and unmotivation and unengaged learners. So when students have more autonomy in what they learn and how they learn it, they will oftentimes find that they feel more motivated to learn. So it's really looking at the shift in becoming the expert in the classroom to facilitating a safe learning environment that invites students to take risk and make mistakes and a way to grow and learn, making time for aspects of teaching that's most rewarding really for us. And again, I mentioned earlier that the biggest barrier for this human connection in every classroom is teacher talk. The more time that teacher spends in front of the classroom transferring all this information, the less time they have to work directly within the small groups and individual learners, supporting that progress towards that firm learning goal that you have set. And so now we want to take a look at how can teachers create this more time and space within the human side of teaching by transferring that information that they would normally present to everyone in the whole class the same way by using a video. They can spend their precious class time facilitating that learning. The goal of various blended learning models to shift the students in the center of their learning and to architect the lessons that provide them with a more control over this experience. So I begin by setting up what is called digital classrooms. You will want to set up students so that they can confidently navigate through this space and access the resources to check out due dates, to submit work, and communicate with you and engage with others synchronously. This will allow them to use the blended learning model where you have students move through units, what could be used as a rotation station model. And I'm going to give you a couple examples of those, or the playlist model. The blended learning approach has a section where you have the whole group rotation model. You could have the flipped classroom model, and you could also have the station rotation model. And using this blended approach learning, you're making choices for what is a whole class lesson and where you need to differentiate. If something is a whole class lesson, then you are encouraged to record a video explanation. This way you can facilitate small group differentiated instructions in a station rotation lesson at a teacher-led station. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. If your goal is to make learning more accessible, inclusive, equitable, and engaging, we really must be strategic in how we use our class time, technology transfer information exceptionally well. So we need to leverage that free time that we have for ourselves in front of the room and encourage our learners to engage actively in the learning activities. So what that would mean is in a flipped classroom model, we want to be able to make it where we'll not only be successful in the blended learning approach, but this method allows the students to be flexible, to develop that critical thinking, and you can use any subject area creatively outside the direct instruction. So one strategy that can be extremely helpful in creating more time and space is, again, think about what is a video or what is an instruction or model that you would use to teach that's a foundational skill. If this is something that you want everyone to know, then you would record that in a video. This allows the students to actually watch and rewatch and do it at their own pace as many times as needed, right? So they can, when they do that, this video will lessen the teacher time and allow you to work with a smaller group and differentiate as you move through. The other thing that I really liked is the strategies that can be used in engaging learners in the flipped model classroom. So there are 5 of the strategies that I thought I'd go over with you. One here is what I call pairing the videos with questions. So you could use Screencastify and Edpuzzles to insert in a video itself. Edpuzzles has multiple choice, short answers. You can engage the learners into lesson videos and so forth. The second way that you could do this is have guided notes. And these optional templates will actually motivate your learners to use one of them while they're taking notes and watching the video. The third thing is you can tap into the sketch notes or the sketch arts. And this taps into the visual learners because not everybody likes to take notes. Some people like to sketch notes. I often do this with reading aloud or doing some sort of reading comprehension strategies. You can capture information by using images to help them understand the content. The fourth thing that you could try, the strategy, is an online discussion prompt. You can allow learners to drive deeper order or higher order level thinking topics and concepts and issues presented in a video, and it allows every student to add in their thoughts as opposed to like a whole group discussion. What I love about this section is that you can actually ask questions that encourage students to go that higher level thinking, which is to evaluate, to analyze, to compare and contrast, to perhaps reflect and debate. And lastly, the strategy that you could use is pair the video with a thinking routine, which will allow you to put students to not only reflect on what they have learned, but allow them to push their thinking if they want to go deeper, as well as perhaps challenge themselves to dig deeper on a topic. And this is another form of differentiation. So just looking at these different strategies in a flipped classroom, you're not just having them sit there and watch a video and that's it, but you're actually engaging them, and your videos are very intentional in making. Another model that I came across when I was doing my online teaching was the modern classroom project approach. I don't know if many of you have heard of this, but it's a phenomenal way to get students engaged. By having this blended instruction approach, it actually encourages students to self-pace, and they work towards mastery-based grading. What I've noticed about this is that it really helps to see which students are struggling with a certain concept and skill. And from this formative assessment, you're able to create small groups and scaffold more mini lessons to help them move forward. So you give them the video, and on that video, which is the Edpuzzles or so forth, you're giving this a self-guided instruction. And I can show you an example of that if you're interested, if I may here. Do you see this one right here that says lesson 2 beginnings?
Yeah, perfect.
So this was one that I used to teach narratives to my students. And what I did was, and again, this is all from Modern Classroom Project. You have this all up and they follow this through guided lessons. So you indicate what is the objective of this lesson. And I say that in red here. And then they follow through the steps. And when they click on the Edpuzzle, they watch the video. And in the video, you can have short answers, multiple choice questions, and it's guiding them as they're going through the video. Very much like Khan Academy, really. It's really nicely done. Then it says on here, now in 2, complete the guided practice box below. Now, what's lovely about this is it gives them time to practice those skills. So if they're learning how to do beginnings, you've provided them with some mentor text, and you're going to go through, like if you're teaching narratives, you have about 8 lessons of different things that you're going to teach in narratives. You're going to teach them how to add in beginnings, how to add in dialogues, how to add in figurative language. And each of those are going to be a lesson. But you're going to use the same form mentor text, which you have shared here on the side, and you've given them a PDF version of it so that they can read it. But you've only taken out, if you're teaching beginnings, you're only going to show them different beginnings. You're going to have them reflect on the side, what type of beginning does this highlight? Do they show action? Do they show reflection? Do they show dialogue? Have they added in all the different elements of adding in a narrative and so forth? Now, once they've done this guided practice, they go into what's called a mastery check. This mastery check then allows them to actually self-assess. They look at, okay, this is what I've done with my story. Let me try 4 to 5 different, or 3 to 4 different ways that I can start my beginning in my story. Have I included all of these following things? Then the powerful thing is you can actually then have them grade their own work. You've given them this rubric. They look at this rubric and say, I've completed 3 out of the boxes. I've added in all of these things. So therefore I see myself as a 6 or a 7. This is the time now that they would come to a teacher-led rotation station, and then you would actually meet with them and say, why would you give yourself a grade? I disagree or disagree, or I agree or I disagree. And then if you feel that the student doesn't understand, then this is where you would either scaffold or support more. And if the student wants to move forward, then they move on. And then you have them write their first part of the story. So it's really nicely done where you're actually guiding them through. And this can only be done in a blended learning approach. So I'm going to stop screen share. I'm going to go back to my slides again here. Screen share. All right. So I used this, another one that I did was what I called a playlist model. And Caitlin Tucker, if you Google her, she has done an amazing job of teaching a lot of these models, the station rotation model, the playlist model, and so forth. And one unit that we did, which was a biography unit, again, in a playlist model, I listed all of the units. I gave the whole unit at once. And in this whole unit, what I did again was I gave the learning objective for each lesson. I had the students then choose how do they want to show their learning. Are they going to show their learning in a visual, in a written form, or in an audio form? You're giving them the choice of how they want to share out their learning. Throughout this unit, I also gave what I called cornerstone assessments. You don't necessarily have to grade every single piece of work that your students do. That's oftentimes where a teacher feels overwhelmed. What you want to do is that out of 10 activities or 10 lessons that you want to pick what I call the cornerstone assessments. Maybe 3 of them are the ones that you really want the students to walk away showing you that they have a solid understanding for. So I would put a star on those lessons to indicate to my students that as you're moving through the unit, focus on these star ones because these are the ones that I will be looking at and assessing you on. So making sure that your feedbacks are also timely. Oftentimes, students aren't engaged in their learners and there's no connection in their learning because they're not getting timely feedback. I can tell you straight from my daughter who's in second year university right now, she says a whole month has gone by and she hasn't heard one thing from her prof. So she doesn't know if she's doing well, if she's not grasping anything. And all of a sudden, the next thing she knows, she's got an assessment coming up. So really having those, incorporating those checklists, which I like to call, giving them exemplars, mentor text. One of the things that I really learned from a lot of the PDs that I've gone through in the past is mentor texts are crucial. If we want our students to do something, we need to show them what that looks like. So showing that backwards by design almost, like where does the end goal? Where do you want them to go? Here's a whole bunch of different examples of how to get there. And then those exit slips, which I like to call. So at the end of each stage, did you master that skill? Now, if you have, then let's move on to the next set. If you haven't, come meet with me. It's like using the class time to have those connections is really crucial. And you get that movement and that engagement as you're moving through. So when you provide students with that guided instruction in the mentor text, it allows them to learn through the scaffolding. You can then assess their learning before you ask them to transfer it and apply it into their own work. The advantage of a self-pace is that you can't really differentiate your students' needs if you have them all moving. Like how many times do we have everyone on this lesson today? Then everybody goes to the next lesson to the next day. Well, some of us aren't there. For me, it's the same rationale as going to a store. In any store, whether it's a shoe store or a clothing store or a grocery store, there's options for everyone. There's choices for everyone. And so we need to also give those kind of choices to our students in the classroom. We can't be moving everyone at the same pace. So having students self-pace really builds that self-reliancy, that self-regulation. And we want our students to be self-aware and self-directed as young adults, so that when they do leave our classrooms and move into university and move into the real world, they're able to manage themselves much better. So the biggest reason for self-paced learning is so critical that it actually makes mastery-based grading possible. How could you possibly grade students to master if you're all moving at the same time? The other thing that, one thing that I learned in Model Classroom is that you can, in any unit, have what they call must-dos, should-dos, and aspire to. So in the same activity, if there are foundational skills that you want students to learn, then you have those things as must-dos. And it's nicely done in this little section here, which he calls lesson classifications. So you could give out the whole lesson to the students, you know. And sometimes I have people say, well, something like this could be overwhelming for some of my students. You as a teacher can make that call. If you have a group of students who you want to just release, for example, the first 3 lessons, you can do so. But even in those 3 lessons, what you can say is these are must-dos. These are probably some guided questions that you should do that will help kind of make your learning a little bit more solid. And then if you want to aspire to, and you want to push some of those to dig deeper, then here are some aspire to questions. So immediately you've already differentiated a lot of your work in your class right there. The other thing that's really powerful is those daily check-ins. So once your students are set up in this digital world and they know how to navigate through your Google Classroom or through the lessons that you've got digitally, it allows you that free time every morning to do a daily check-in. And this daily check-in allows you to kind of help your students be self-started. So when they're walking into the classroom, they're not expecting you to stand at the front of the class to lead the whole class session. They've already got a routine for themselves. They know where they're starting. So when they walk in, you're standing at the door. How are you doing today? Let me know where you at this lesson. How are you feeling? Like, you know, those type of things. Maybe you have a student, we all know students come in with a baggage of emotions, whether if they didn't have a good night's sleep, whether they had an argument or whatever. We need to touch base with them because that really is a make or break. And these are the connections that we can only make if we teach kids to be self-starters. So each child, when you're touching base with them right from the morning, they feel cared for and they feel valued. And this ensures that you're paying attention to them and their needs. And this will automatically and immediately help track where they are in their learning. If they're not having a good day, maybe you have them do something else because you know they're not going to be productive. So these kind of daily check-ins, I think, are crucial for those human connections. I saw another teacher do this, make a board game. You know, you could do your lessons in a board game. Set this back and flexible seating is something that I came across with when I was teaching in Hong Kong, is have your classrooms, if possible, have flexible seatings. You know, Google does it in their companies and so forth. Not everybody has to sit behind a desk. You know, just think of yourself, where do you learn best? So trying to provide with as many different resources for the kids and different ways is really, really important. I've already gone through this. So the 3 types of stations that I really encourage teachers is the teacher-led. You can have online and you can have offline. Explanations that really that are really complex would benefit from small groups, which could be teacher-led. These are the ones that we want to pull into our station rotations. This way we can customize, adapt our explanations, our word choices, and even the level of support and scaffolding, and even the level of academic rigor and complexity of the prompts and the problems that we want to focus on. We can differentiate in these small groups to be more effective, and more students will likely be more motivated to ask a question in a small group than they would be in a whole class setting. One example I can give you is as an English teacher, when I would teach how to write a thesis statement. Something like that I could do as a small video because I know that it's something that I would explain to the whole class. So with that, in this video, I would go over where it would go in an introduction, where it would fit in a paragraph, how the structure of the thesis statement would be, what are the things that you want to include that are necessary. But at the same time, this allows those students to watch that video with as many times as possible, because we all know how many times they ask us the same question over and over again. So if it's a foundational skill, then record it on a video. But then if you want to ask them to analyze something, analyze a quote, this is your time for that student teacher-led instruction. It is much more helpful for you as a teacher to have them in a small group where you're actually customizing your explanation and your model for the students right in front of you. So you're ready for that rigorous instruction. You can either pull more challenging quotes and have them not guided so much, or for those students that need more scaffolding and support, then you can tackle the quote together and walk through the process together. So it's, again, you're giving them that real-time feedback. So the goal of the flipped classroom should be to shift from the consumables to the producibles. So you have the opportunity to match your instructional activity with the environment that makes the most sense. Ramsey Masalan defines the flipped teaching as leveraging technology to appropriately pair the learning activity with the learning environment. This flexibility is why technology has the potential to really be a transformative in education. And lastly, I just wanted to move into, I'm a big Bloom's taxonomy person. So if you've heard of Bloom's taxonomy, like I really think oftentimes our homework describes the flipped classroom only to engage our low-level thinkers, thinking skills, which is remembering and understanding. It's the application, the analysis, the evaluation, and the creative part that is rarely engaged at home. So there is an opportunity to get students thinking at a higher level at home if we pair that content with extension activities. That requires them to think critically about what they have just viewed. The important element is to connect the students online outside of class so that they can then support that network of peers and ask questions and bounce ideas and learn from one another when they come back in the classroom. And this is why I'm a big supporter of integrating this online blended learning into the curriculum. So to end with, the unfortunate thing is oftentimes we think that a quiet classroom is one that is learning, you know, a compliant classroom, students who are sitting behind their desk and just working. Where in fact, I think classrooms that have students busy having discourse, moving around, creating, showing that engagement is one that is showing a lot of learning. Because if you look at any workforce that you work into, we're not all sitting behind our desk quietly. You know, how many times have you been in your workforce that you want to bounce off an idea with someone? You want to kind of think aloud or process and so forth. So why aren't we making our classrooms like that? You know, why are we not using that model blended learning approach where if it's a foundational skill, teach it in a video, but use that amazing class time for those connections? I just kind of whipped through that because I was hoping to make sure. So, you know, create student-centered classrooms, focus your class time on getting those students to engage in active learning processes, collaborate through research, and so forth. I have a few more examples that I can share with you, but perhaps maybe I can ask if people have questions right now.
Yes, thank you so much. For anyone who's curious or wants to ask a question, again, you can use the raise hand function, which will be at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can also write any questions you have in the chat or unmute yourself and ask away. So I'll open the floor now if anyone has any questions for Nazli. Yes, Joanna.
Thank you so much for the presentation. First of all, I love your slides.
Oh, thank you.
The look of your slides, and as well as the information on them, of course. Well, I could come up with a couple questions, but one thing that I missed was on the caption, it said Caitlin Tucker. I'm not sure the name you said that we should.
Catlin Tucker.
Catlin. Okay. I thought the Caitlin was not correct.
Yeah.
All right. Catlin Tucker.
Catlin. Yeah, she has written many books.
Okay.
The books that she has written she's worked with Katie Novak a lot, and I have a lot of their books. So UDL and blended learning. Let me actually just share my screen again with you, and I can show this to you. She's done a lot of blended learning, and what I love about her work is that she will give you tons and tons of resources in terms of blog posts, just a bunch of and she's very she connects with you. Like, I just basically connected with her on Twitter, and I said, I have all these really units that are just boring, and they're boring for me as a teacher. How can I spice them up? And she was the one that suggested the playlist model for me. And right away I went in and she gave me the template for it, and I jumped in and I tried it. And, I reached out to her and I said, this is really great. What else do you have? Like between her, Katie Novak, they've done a lot of book. Katie Novak has also just released a book on equity by design. And that's another really great book I would encourage a lot of the educators to use. But the Modern Classroom Project is also one that I would really encourage, because the blended learning approach fits in really nicely there as well.
Yeah, that was the other thing I was going to ask about. Was the Modern Classroom Project. So that is sort of a model of
it is a model. So they focus on, like I said, that self-pace. I have it here, I believe. Where is it? Right here. So it's the blended instruction. So it has self-pace. And that self-paced, like I showed you, it has the Ed Puzzle video. So it's really crucial to tell your kids what's the learning objective of each lesson, like what, and using those I can statements is really powerful. I can actually do this, right? So having them work through that is they're watching the video lesson, and the video lesson does, have them stop and interact with the video. And then having that guided piece is that self-paced part. So they have to show mastery before then they go and apply it to their own learning.
Nice.
And to me, these are kind of like the summative assessments that you can use through, right? So you can quickly, and that's the thing, it's that real-time feedback right there and then. So if they're doing this on their own at home, and I'm working with a lot of students right now, I assign those lessons. And then when I meet with them, this allows us the time to kind of ask for those deeper level questions. If they're not understanding a skill, then I can scaffold it a little bit more and support them more. If they want a little bit more rigor, so then I provide them with more of that. So it's really using that 45-minute time block in the classroom for that human connection. And you're not just standing in front of the room talking to them the entire time.
Right. And I think that's so important. I teach an all online grad program. So a lot of these tips, like the guided questions and things, when they're reading, not to just give them a reading or give them a video and guide them through it is incredibly helpful. And the exit slips, I used to use them when I would teach in person, but I use them online now because it tells you so much.
Exactly.
I don't know what you do. That's the other thing I was going to ask. What do you do for your exit slips? Because I sort of have.
They can be very, very simple. I just look at my objective. What was it? You have to be very intentional. What's your objective of that lesson? And so the exit slip is really like, a conclusion. You're going back to your introduction is what was your goal for that lesson? And the exit slip could be something as even paper written down or verbal. It could be anecdotal. Yeah. So the other thing that I kind of passed, and I'm a big believer in building those connections with my students. So I oftentimes every year when I start any teaching year, I spend the first 6 weeks in building classroom routines and teaching them about class meetings. And then I don't know if you're very familiar with this, is I have my students take the VIA character strength test. And this is a series of like 70 questions that's geared for students. And they just simply answer these questions. There's no right or wrong in them. And it gives them their top 25 character traits. And when they learn their top 25 character traits, they're just almost like, wow, I didn't know that I actually have a passion for learning, or I didn't know that I was a self-regulator, just basically in how they answer these. And then I have them set it there. And then once they learn about a little bit about who they are, then I have them take a learning style test assessment to see if they're an audio learner, if they're video learner, or so forth. You know, I think one of the things that's lacking is oftentimes we don't know what kind of learning style suits us best. And we try to fit into a model that fits everybody. And that's where the frustration and that's where the disengagement happens, is because we're trying to make ourselves be like everybody else and not to embrace our own originality and seeing what our strengths are. So while getting them to get the via character strength, finding out their top character traits are, they also like to see what are the traits that they need to nurture. If there's someone who doesn't self-regulate, then they come and they communicate that with me and say, Miss I need help in this. So then we sit and set some goals, some short-term goals. Those SMART goals are powerful. You know, it gives them something to look forward to. And I make them very short. I say at the end of 2 weeks, at the end of 1 month. Let's not go at the end of the semester. That's too long. You know, it's not measurable. Like, you know, you lose track whenever we do this. We all know with our New Year's Eve kind of like, this year I'm going to lose this many pounds, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. You know, we don't measure ourselves that way. But if we set SMART goals and teach our kids to set these SMART goals based on what their strengths are and what are the areas that they need to nurture more, and learn to communicate that with us, then you can actually help them with their learning and their learning goals. I think Kelvin has a question. Yes, go ahead.
So a quick question. So obviously you've presented like this topic to a lot of other educators and education professionals. But I was wondering, have you ever presented this, a more innovative way of learning to parents, and like how are parent reception usually?
Absolutely. So right now, Kelvin, I'm doing my own consulting work. The reason I went into my own consulting work is because in my years of teaching, I found that I can easily convince other teachers to come on board, or I can work with my students. But there's another key factor in the partnership, and that's the parents. So during my time when I was teaching in the classroom, I would actually use my planning time and invite parents in for coffee. And during my 30-minute, 40-minute planning time, during this coffee time, I would teach them, or I would show them what are some of the skills and learning types that we're doing in the classroom. Because I often think that the resistance that parents have is because they don't know what's happening and they don't know how to learn. And the way that their children are learning is different than the way they learned. So you actually have to have those parents on board with you, and they're crucial. So at the beginning of every year in the parent, what do you call it? Invitation where they come in at it's slipping my mind. The parent night is where you would come in to go over the whole year curriculum. I would show them a triangle, and I would say, the student is at the top of the triangle, the school is at this side, and you are at the other side. And communication is key. And I would actually invite those parents in if I'm teaching a math lesson. The way we learn math now is quite different than the way they learned math. So I would bring them in and I would give them some questions and I would have them tackle it, and so forth. And this really empowered that communication and that connection, so that when their students and their children were doing things at home, they weren't left in the dark and not knowing. So I'm really glad that you asked that question, Kelvin, because I think the parent community is key in having a student feel successful, because otherwise there's this push and pull mentality that their parents wants them to work towards a grade, and then their school is teaching them a different way, right? So who gets hurt and confused? It's the student inside, like in the middle, right? So having those parents informed on what you're doing, the style and the techniques that you're using is really key.
I have a question for you as well, Nazli. One thing that I really liked about your presentation was your concept you have of like daily check-ins. And I can imagine if you're teaching in K to 12, that would be pretty functionally possible. But say, for example, in a university setting, or if, for example, as Joanna said, teaching a completely online cohort of people who you won't be seeing every day, or might only be seeing a few times through the semester, how would you adapt or approach, that particular idea with, the tertiary education sector in mind?
I would suggest, setting aside time for yourself. Like as a professor, I think I would set aside a time and offer those flexible times. Say, for example, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, here's some check-in times. So open it up and say, you could either, and I would go with choice. You can either check in by doing this exit slip with me, or you can do an online. I'll be here doing grading, whatever. You can have your Zoom open during that time. I did that during the COVID situation, where I had a lot of kids where I did my lessons, but then as they were doing the lessons, they were having a lot of difficulty. So I would shoot out an email to my student community and say, Miss I is going to be online from 12 to 1. And I would love to check in with you at this time. If you feel like you can come in during this time, great. If not, give me some options that would be, of course, workable for you and me. Then I'll try to accommodate that. I think, again, it really just comes down to choice, giving people choice. And whether if it's an online thing or a video, have them video, send in a video even. I think that's a great thing you could do. It could be a voice recording, it could be a video or a written, whatever it is. But they could do in person, or they can even just say, I am available during this time. Perhaps try that.
Okay, great. Thank you. This is some wonderful advice. We only have a little bit of time left, but I think we might have time for one more question if anyone has any.
If you also do have questions, I can share my, you can find me on diversifylearning2020@gmail.com. You can email me with your questions, or you can find me on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook at diversify.edu.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, so I think that this concludes our first Tech Expo day and sessions for our week. We will be having further Tech Expo sessions during this week. Tomorrow will be our in-person day, so if you are on campus, we would love to see you there. We'll be meeting in the Neville Scarf building between 12 and 1, I think is correct, but will probably be some buffer room on either end. Before we finish, we would also like to invite everyone to join us, especially our presenters, in our GatherTown space. This is a web app that the lovely Marika has set up for us as a meeting space for people to further explore some of these ideas. So if you had any questions about either of our presentations today, you're more than welcome to jump into the GatherTown space, where we will be waiting to answer any questions, or even just have a chat about some of the really interesting topics that were brought up today. We also have a quick survey. We'd love to hear some feedback on your experiences with Tech Expo today. So Ariane has very kindly, lovely LTR Ariane, had put all of these links into the chat. So we would love to hear from you. Filling out that form would be incredibly useful for us. So thank you for doing so. And of course, we have our other upcoming sessions. So if you're interested, you can always visit our website. Thank you all, everyone. I will stop recording.